Hey, Bradley Beal has a big contract offer from the Wizards on the table, and John Wall is hoping he'll sign it. He's telling The Athletic there's no John Wall without Bradley Beal. Wall also argues that the only reason he's known as the franchise player is because he got there first. On Beal's end, when he received an award for his work in the community in June, Beal invited Wall to present him. So, Malika, how does this change your perception of Wall and Beal's relationship? It's been bandied about that they don't always necessarily get along. They haven't been on the same page per se.
Right.
So what do you think?
Well, here's the thing. I think that that's great and that's chummy and that's what should be happening between teammates, but it's not mutually exclusive to have a good relationship off the court or present an award to someone and then have that translate to re-signing. We've seen plenty of times, and most namely what comes to mind is LeBron James and Dwayne Wade, where stars can get along in the best way possible, and that partnership just doesn't work going forward. And so I don't necessarily think that even if this relationship is better than has been reported, that would automatically translate to someone re-signing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think this is anything other than John Wall is smart enough to know that if he returns to a team with Bradley Beal on it, it is entirely more competitive than if it is a team, in the midst of a rebuild where it's Wall and a lot of young guys and a lot of castaways and journeymen and absorbing contracts, right? I mean, John Wall wants to play competitive basketball. Right. And if I assume that he is under the belief that if he can get even back to a good fraction of his full potential, that he and Bradley Beal represent one of the strongest backcourts in the Eastern Conference. And hey, that in the Eastern Conference is a playoff team. If those two guys are healthy and playing well and other guys understand their roles, a team with that Wall and nothing else is that's a tough road to hoe for a guy who's going to be hard to move if you're Washington.
KP, do you think they're a playoff team if both guys are healthy? Now, we don't see Wall this year more than likely, but moving forward, do you think?
They still got to fill out a bunch of role players. I mean, Otto Porter was such a huge loss for them at the trade deadline last year. I mean, you look at the rest of that roster.
And they got nothing back for him, it felt like.
Yeah, it was pretty much just cap relief. I mean, I've been referring to it as their austerity year because they had been spending so much money. It had these 3 max guys, and now they've had to scale it way back, and the roster reflects it.
Yeah, I mean, they got back expiring contracts, as you mentioned, Bobby Portis being one of them. Good player, but I'm saying, like, he wasn't going to be there long term. And then second-round pick, basically, in 2023. So Wall made more news this weekend at his charity event in Maryland, giving backpacks to local kids. He told The Athletic, "I'd rather build my legacy here than win a ring. I never want to be one of those guys that wants to chase a ring." Wall said he wants to spend his entire career in D.C., where he's a known force for good in the community. His contract, however, is something the Wizards have looked to try to get rid of. So is there a way for Wall to spend his entire career in Washington, Kevin Arnovitz?
I mean, in this respect, that until that contract becomes value neutral, I don't know how the Wizards move it, and can they justify moving it if it means forfeiting assets that prevent them from doing what they need to do, which is to get younger and sort of build for the future. I mean, it is the answer to the question when you ask executives around the league, what is the most toxic contract in basketball? It is the leading vote getter, and it has been so for about a year now. And that's just going to be, so I think he might be in Washington for a very long time for not the reason he would want, which is, wow, they just really value the fact that I can lead a team to the promised land. It's, we don't know how to move you.
Right. Well, and then what he's saying about wanting to just spend a long time in Washington is exactly what he should be saying as he's rehabbing from this injury, where you don't know exactly what kind of player you're going to be getting back. You don't know what percentage of the quote-unquote old John Wall will be returning. And so him talking about wanting to play there for a long time, I mean, those are the things you want to hear from someone you paid to be a franchise player.
But I think it's legitimate. I mean, I think one of the things we've learned, as much as we've talked about player empowerment in terms of players changing teams, I think the other aspect of it is what happiness looks like to every player is not the same. Mm-hmm. And there's been an assumption for a period of time that it has to be about winning a championship. And if that's not the case for John Wall, and if he's happiest where he's been playing his entire career, then that makes sense for him. And I think to Kevin's point, like, he's not going to be traded now. It doesn't make sense. You'd be trading him so that you could clear cap space to make trades to take on similarly bad contracts for the draft picks you just gave up to get rid of him. So, there's no incentive for them to look to trade him now.
KP, there was a rumor that maybe they could be traded together potentially. There was a talk about Miami or whatnot. Do you find that at all feasible?
I think if they were going to trade Wall, it probably would have to be together, but that is just such a massive amount of salary that it complicates things in a hurry.
Yeah. Arnovitz, you think that?
No, I'm literally trying to go through my head. Just to go, was there a team
You were shaking your head. That's why.
Can it kind of absorb both of those contracts, even just mechanically? How do you pull that deal off? It'd be fascinating. I mean, when's the last time a guy, like two max level guys, were traded together, one because you had to incentivize the other?
I mean, if it's happened, it wasn't when the maxes were nearly this large. It would be the most salary that's ever been traded in a trade in NBA history, I think.
Yeah, it's pretty wild stuff, certainly.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports analysis and highlights, download the ESPN app. And for live streaming and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.